Will the Committee of Supply please come to order? This section of the Committee of Supply will now resume consideration of the estimates of Executive Council. Questions will proceed in a global manner. The floor is now open for questions.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. And
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
thank you, Honourable Chair. And we're going to jump right into a question here on proposed injection site that the Premier says is not finalized, and yet they've applied for federal approval on that location. So I'll ask the Premier, is the location of 200 Israeli a proposed injection site? Is that going forward? Yes or no?
The Honourable First Minister.
The progressive conservative approach to addictions medicine has been shameful, to say the least. There's a purposeful intent to inflame the issue by choosing words which are not used by those with expertise in the area. You can look to the member's preamble for an example of that, or you can look at numerous questions from question period from the current PC caucus to illustrate the issue. When we talk about a supervised consumption site, I think it's important to get the words right, because this is about saving lives. And I think the gravity of the situation requires us to show necessary respect and seriousness to the issue. We're joined here at the table with my colleague from Waverley, who is a frontline firefighter, first responder, firefighter, paramedic. Some of the stories he's had to share about what goes on as a result of addictions are pretty stark. The member opposite was part of a government in which numerous ministers, including the former first minister that he decided to attach his name to, lied. And it is, of course, parliamentary because none of those people are MLAs anymore. They were defeated in part because they took this approach of trying to wedge politic their way through issues that demand seriousness and a smart approach. I take an optimistic view of the people of Manitoba. I know that you're smart people, and so I treat you with maturity and seriousness. When we talk about a supervised consumption site, the reason why we use that term is because there will be different types of consumption taking place there. People across Manitoba know that the scourge of drugs is being pursued in many forms. Some people are popping pills, other people are smoking substances, some people are shooting drugs. Those are different forms of consumption. And a tabloid news style approach to trying to inflame sentiment by purposely choosing language that is not used by the medical experts, I think demeans the seriousness of the issue. So that speaks to the word consumption site. Obviously, it's a location, so that leaves the first word in terms of the technical term. Supervised, medical supervision, nurses, paramedics, people who are trained to be able to intervene and save lives. Under the PC government, the bathroom at Tim Hortons became an unsupervised consumption site. Now they want to sloganeer their way back to making that situation worse. We're saying, listen, we're investing in recovery. The Anno Recovery Center being a signature investment that we're proud to work on with the private sector and the Family Foundation. We're expanding access to addictions medicine. We're investing in mental health workers. We're ensuring that harm reduction approaches are there, backed by the science, alongside approaches that focus on recovery and spiritual growth as well, too. So it's a comprehensive approach. And among those approaches, the experts in addictions medicine, people who went to medical school, medical doctors who practice in communities every day, like Swan River, like Winnipeg, like Brandon, tell us that it's important to have a comprehensive approach. Now, of course, when we talk about a supervised consumption site, we're only talking about Winnipeg, and really right now we're only talking about one small part of Winnipeg. But what the experts in addictions medicine tell us is that such a site will save lives. But it's important to get it right. What happens outside of a supervised consumption site is just as important as what happens inside. So we have to work with law enforcement. We have to work with community. And I'm proud of the fact that our minister showed up, not just for town hall meetings that we organized, but town hall meetings organized by others. Cannot think of a single example of PC ministers doing that in the past government. So yes, we are proceeding with the supervised consumption site. Will it 100% be at the Disraeli location? No, we can't say that. That option's on the table and it's out for consultation, but we're going to listen to the community before we make a determination about opening doors.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Honourable Chair, and the Premier's right, language does matter. I'll use the term he wishes, and experts have used supervised consumption site. That was a slip of the tongue. I didn't mean to anything by that, but what does demean the process is that the Premier takes 5 minutes to answer a question that he answered in the last 30 seconds. Manitobans, you can see it here himself. So we're talking about demeaning the process. I apologize. I will say supervised consumption site. Premier, 4.5 minutes to answer a question that took him 30 seconds. So I'll ask him if we're going to continue on this topic here. Can the Premier please tell Manitobans how many needles were handed out in 2024? How many needles is government planning to hand out in 2025? On top of that, how many of these needles were returned safely in 2024? What is this Premier's budget for the needle exchange program in 2025-26?
The remainder of his time. Yeah.
The Honourable First Minister.
It's impossible to compare accurately how much the budget is bigger than it was under the PC government because the budget under the PCs for safe needle collection was zero. And so if you're doing an equation where zero is the denominator, it's going to be tough. Lowest common denominator, of course, is what the PCs specialize in. When we think about the various ad campaigns they ran in the last election. And also when we think about thanking Donald Trump. Not a good idea. Manitobans know better than that, but member opposite does not. Not only thanks Donald Trump, today in question period doubled down. Or I don't know how many times it's been, but it's multiples now. And nodded his head vigorously when his words were read back in the House. So there you go. Thank you, Donald Trump, quote unquote, by the member for Fort White. The reason why I invoked the previous government's needle distribution program, which our government has continued, is because it highlights the hypocrisy of the PC caucus. When they sat around the government table on their way to defeat at the hands of Heather Stephenson, they funded needle distribution programs in Prairie Mountain Health, in Winnipeg and other parts of the province. Now those same programs continue under a different government, and they want to make a political issue out of it. It's not only what turns people off politics, but it's also irresponsible because public health is at stake here. We have a number of challenges in the public sphere when it comes to public health. Vaccine hesitancy, the need to educate folks about access to primary care, stopping the transmission of infectious disease. And all of these things would be improved if we had mature, evidence-based discussion on healthcare that didn't try to resort not only to the lowest common denominator, but the cheapest possible slogan. Unfortunately, that's what we see in question period on a day-to-day basis. So across the province, we've listened to communities that are dealing with addictions. We've listened to communities that have challenges with infectious disease. We've listened to communities where vaccine hesitancy is an issue. And we've listened to communities where needle collection was identified as a priority. And we responded with action, not with empty, cheap slogans, not with trying to politicize the issue, not with trying to say, well, our government never did that, when in fact they did, which is, of course, what the PCs did in Swan River and Prairie Mountain Health. But we responded with action. And so we decided to fund needle collection programs. There's more work necessary to combat addictions. There's more work necessary to combat infectious disease. There's more work necessary to combat vaccine hesitancy and the opioid crisis. But you don't combat those things with the ostrich approach that the PCs follow by sticking your head in the sand and then waving your tail feathers around and trying to purport that that is sloganeering in the face of science and could in some way be effective. No, you gotta work with the experts. You gotta work with community. If there's a gap in understanding or a gap in communication between experts and community, it's a role of responsible government to bridge that gap, not to inflame sentiment. The fundamental flaw of the landfill ads, the parental right ads, the line of questioning that the member is trying to go down, is that it's an abdication of one of the core responsibilities of any leader in the public sphere. Somebody that I respect very much said that one of the core responsibilities of a leader in our society is not to inflame divisions within the society. And yet that's what the members opposite doing. They just lost government and they had so many tail feathers handed to them because of this approach. So if they want to repeat this, we will gladly march into the Lakesides and Interlake Gimleys in the next campaign and hand more walk-in pay. Oh yeah, no, Willard Reeves is definitely going to be in Fort White, definitely.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. It's funny that the Premier mentions Willard Reeves. He should check his membership. And he'll be pleasantly surprised to see where he is. But Manitobans, you see it here. 5 minutes of absolutely nothing. Didn't answer any questions. And the Premier should know his fiscal year ends. Wasn't talking about 23-24. NDP were in power. 24-25. 25-26 is this budget. It was a simple question. He's talking about sloganeering. There's no sloganeering. I'm asking for questions, answers. Sloganeering? Sloganeering. I don't know if that's a word. Was that so clear? Anyways, we're asking for answers, your Premier. We don't need 5 minutes for you to go on and absolutely just whatever you want to say. We're asking for questions. 24-25 when the NDP was in power versus 25-26 when the NDP is in power. What was the budget for the needle exchange program? That's it. What is the budget for the needle exchange program 24-25 versus 25-26? When I talk about the previous PC governments, It's your government. We're looking for answers. Manitobans have a right to hear the answer.
The Honorable First Minister.
Members opposite want to throw the stone and hide their hand. They want to ask a leading question and look away because they know that what they're doing is wrong and they're ashamed of it. The reason why I mentioned the track record of the former failed PC government is because it's relevant to understanding the context in which this question is asked. They have a great interest in trying to politicize the issue of harm reduction in Manitoba after being handed their walking papers from a government that practiced harm reduction. If you can't see the hypocrisy in that, then I think it is valid for me to spend 5 minutes at a time for an entire afternoon beating down the walls of ignorance and letting the light shine on through. And while we're at it, I'm sure that folks in Interlake, Gimli, Arborg in particular, would wonder why the members opposite are politicizing these issues instead of discussing what about the great plans for this new personal care home that we're going to get. When we're talking about Lac du Bonnet, I'm sure the member there, still lying down from the encounter that he had with the education minister earlier today, they would probably want to see their constituents have some of these questions answered. So the member opposite also had a quote-unquote encounter today when he tried to raise the issue of math, and so I'd proposed to him that the math he's looking for to answer his question is what is 30,000 divided by 0? You know, I'll kind of refer to my cell phone here. Open up that calculator app. Undefined. What that means is it's incomparable, it's undefinable, the contrast between doing nothing and taking action. So our government took action after listening to folks and decided to fund needle collection programs. The members opposite, in any Facebook post, in any conversation with people, whether that's in Swan River, the Swan Valley, Swan Lake, outside a performance of Swan Lake at the concert hall in downtown Winnipeg, they should begin by saying, we never funded any needle collection programs. However, as a penance and as an act of apology, we would very humbly like to take your questions about harm reduction forward. And oh, by the way, we agree that harm reduction is backed by the evidence and backed by physicians with expertise in addictions medicine. But they won't do that. What they'll do is try to portray the current government as in some way being the creator of needle distribution programs in Manitoba, which is not true. They rolled out these needle distribution programs. They oversaw them and expanded them year after year. And now in opposition, rather than trying to create understanding towards an evidence-based approach to combating the addictions crisis that is taking lives in every community from people from every socioeconomic background and every cultural community, rather than try to help, they want to sow division by purposely using words and lines of questions that they know are wrong and not backed by the science. What do I mean by wrong? I mean that the member opposite knows full well the track record of his government, and yet he tries to chastise me for mentioning the proper context in which any program we're making reference to in this community comes about. When I say misguided, I say because, again, the heady days of Monday when he was giving a speech about how it's all going to be different, and then 20 minutes later he's heckling the Minister for Sports, Culture, Heritage and Tourism. It mirrors the same misguided approach to try and politicize the issue of supervised consumption and harm reduction and needle collection programs across Manitoba. So again, what do you do when you don't have the facts? What do you do when you don't have the values? You make up invented issues such as, oh, he should answer in 10 seconds instead of 5 minutes. But the point is this: it takes time to break down ignorance and even political mistakes. And so again, let's spend an afternoon together, 5 minutes at a time, breaking down the ignorance that persists on the progressive side, progressive conservative side of the aisle. And let's continue to let the light shine, and light, of course, being a metaphor for truth.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. And yeah, let's shine some light in here. So 15 minutes now, ask the Premier some pointed questions and no answers. And these aren't questions. There's no politicizing of the questions. They're just simple numbers. Did the NDP government budget for 24-25 versus 25-26 for the needle exchange program? No answer. 15 minutes. How many needles were handed out in 24? No answer. 25? No answer. How many are they expecting to be returned this year? No answer. We're not talking, we're not politicizing anything here. Premier wants to continue to go down this path and this narrative. I know I'm not Heather Stephenson, I'm not Brian Palliser. I know he wants them to be sitting here. I've been here for 3 years. Premier wants to continue to attack and attack and attack. We're asking questions. Manitobans have a right to these answers. He refuses to answer them. To take the Premier's word, he wants to shine the light in here. If he wants to have understanding, it's hard to have understanding when the Premier refuses to answer any questions. None. He talks about the Ann Oak Recovery Center. Well, let's talk about the Bruce Oak Recovery Center. Who funded that? Can the Premier talk about who gave money to that program? And? Keep going. Premier knows this light. He knows the answer. He knows the answer to this one. Oh, yeah, he doesn't want to answer. The previous PC government did. Previous PC government investments create over 1,000 treatment spaces. 1,000 treatment spaces, previous PC government. Now, he wants to continue. We're not talking about the past. We're talking about, I mean, this is really, okay, continue to go. So this is, no, you, so Manitobans can see. Premier refuses to answer and wants to heckle, just like the rest of his MLAs.
The Honourable Member for Waverley.
Clarify for the record that the First Minister has been providing answers to the questions. The member opposite may not like the answer all the time or the substance of that answer, but the assertion that you're making when he's not answering would imply that there's a failure to follow procedure where none has occurred. So I would suggest that maybe to remind the member from Fort White that he should be following procedure here.
The Honourable Member for Interlake Gimli on the same point of order.
Yeah, that is obviously not a point of order. Disputed the facts. It does not imply a point of order. So I'm sure the chair will find it to easily dismiss this ridiculous assertion.
Any other speakers on the alleged point of order? So it's not a point of order. So obviously we know this is not a point of order, but at this time before reintroducing the Leader of the Opposition, I'd like to gently remind all members on both sides that whoever's holding the floor should be able to speak without other members speaking over them. And I'd ask that all members show some respect for the member who holds the floor, regardless of who that is. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Yeah, thank you, Honourable Chair. It shows the member from Waverley doesn't have simple comprehension of finances or math. I've asked a math question, a number question. What is the budget? There was no number the Premier gave, therefore he didn't answer the question. Member from Waverley might want to understand that. Premier might want to understand we're asking numbers. We're asking about money. Manitobans have a right to know. I don't know why the Premier doesn't want to answer that question. It's very unfortunate that he doesn't want to, and the Premier wants to continue to heckle now. We'll continue down that. The government, his government committed to hiring 100 community mental health workers to work with police. But we know that people have been waiting years for this service, for community mental health services. So can the Premier talk about what are the wait times for community mental health services in each region in Manitoba under this Premier? How many new positions have been filled for working with police? Maybe the Premier can finally shine some light on some numbers. How many of the 100 community mental health workers have been hired? In what region? I know the Premier is, we'll leave it there. Let's see if we get an answer.
The Honorable First Minister.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. It's really something to see the member get emotional so easily. You always tell at the quicken pace of his words. And look at that, just jumped out of his chair when a simple wind blew through the room. So the numbers that were shared, 30,000 divided by 0 is the fact that the first needle cleanup program we funded cost 30 grand, as opposed to 0 under the PCs. I'm sure the people listening in the PC staff room caught the reference, but the member did not. Would have thought he was doing his homework for the past 6 months when he was not showing up for question period. There you go. Took you long enough. Holy cow. Second point of order. Point of order. He didn't actually say point of order. I get to go first. No, he didn't. No, I said it first.
The Honorable Member for Interlake Gimli.
You can't reflect on somebody's presence or absence in the chamber or committee.
The Honorable First Minister on the same, this alleged point of order.
Yeah, I'll withdraw the comment and instead say when people don't show up for work for 6 months. Now I'd like to raise another point of order after.
We have to address the first point of order. Does anyone else want to speak to this? Okay. So obviously that wasn't a point of order, but we'll move on to this second request for a point of order.
Yes.
The Honorable First Minister.
Thank you. The member for Interlake Gimli said, and I quote, no, I withdrew the comment though in my response, right? So it's been resolved. Actually, that's the point we're going to get to right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
You have
we're going to
tears
take
in
a
your
moment
eyes.
to confer with the clerks.
Your eyes
who
are red.
Oh, sorry. We're going to take a moment to confer with the clerks, so we can stop challenging the chair, and everyone will stop for a moment. Thank you. Okay, that was in fact a point of order, but the First Minister had withdrawn his comment, and we can now consider the point of order resolved. The Honourable First Minister.
Yeah, on a point of order. The member for Interlake Gimli said, waiting for the chair to do her job. Quote and end quote. Clearly reflecting on the chair, which is a violation of the rules. And so I'd ask either that the member apologize to you, or that, you take that under consideration to rule that that was a violation of order.
Thank you. The Honourable Member for Interlake Gimli.
Yeah, I think if the member reviews Hansard tomorrow, there will be no comment of such sort on there, and therefore no point of order.
So we're going to take a moment to review. Thank you. Right, so that was not a point of order as the comment was made off the record. I would offer a general caution to all members about the decorum going on both sides in this committee. The Honourable First Minister had the floor prior to those alleged point of orders.
I appreciate your guidance, and thank you for pointing out that the comment was made, but it was made at a time when the member for Interlake Gimli was not recognized to speak, which means that he was also heckling, which is a violation of order. Again, I want to point out for the record that the member, in spite of that, tried to claim that the comment did not happen in contravention of, I guess, your recent guidance. So with that in mind, I'll return to pointing out the rickety line of questioning that the member for Fort White is pursuing here. So again, 30,000 divided by 0 is a reference to the fact that the first needle collection program we funded cost $30,000. And the fact that I included a denominator, again, an oblique reference to the fact that the PCs always play to the lowest common denominator of 0, is because they never funded any needle collection anywhere in Manitoba. Now, the member, throws a stone, hides the hand. Oh, I'm just trying to ask some questions about numbers when he knows full well what he's trying to do. Day after day, he puts up people in question period who try to inflame this issue and make misguided and ultimately harmful points and use slogans to try and inflame what should be a conversation about science and evidence when it comes to harm reduction. These questions are clearly part of that overall strategy and scenario. So again, I've provided answers to every question that has been posed here. I have provided numbers. The member is curious about the needle collection budget in total, 165,000 divided by 0. Again, you cannot define the nature of the increase relative to the 0 action that the PCs oversaw during their time in government. This is the action that we took. This is the answer that was provided. The member opposite was not aware of the fact that an answer is being provided, but that's okay. We can use more of his time to repeat said answer. When we turn to the issues of mental health and addiction services, I can tell this committee that there has been a significant improvement in wait times under our government. When we took office, the wait times for withdrawal management services, to use one example, was at 15 days. We've reduced that to 8 days as of Q3 24-25. Still too long, still more work to do, but it's a sign that progress is being made. Waits for supportive recovery housing, similarly, still too long, I'm sure, in the eyes of everyone in government, including the hardworking civil servants who show up every day to improve services and deliver what you need as Manitobans. But it is an improvement over when we took office, picking up from a slack PC government. Specific numbers that the member is interested in ascertaining: 36 days on the last day of his being a Minister of the Crown under Heather Stefanson. 23 days a year later. So again, a lot done, a lot to do, but if the PCs were ever to be anywhere near the gears of power, there'd be a lot to lose. When we look again at the question of staffing up mental health, what happened under members opposite? What was the work done to support first responders in their valiant efforts? It's very little, very little. When we talked about staffing up 100 new mental health positions, the first 3 that we identified were to support first responders, firefighters, law enforcement, paramedics. From there, the next 29 positions are devoted to responding in community to mental health crises. Where they did nothing, we are taking action.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. I don't know what the Premier is talking about. He's talking about slogans. There's no slogans being said here at all today. I know he wants to live in the past and he wants to attack previous PC leadership. No slogans on this side. We're just asking questions. He wants to talk about there's science or no science. Yeah, math is based in science. Science is based in math. If the Premier doesn't want to give us an answer, there are clear questions on how many needles are going to be returned. He wants to keep going back to the previous PC government. I know he wants to live in the past. It was a question on his government, the 2 years of his NDP government. How much money is being spent in 24, 25, 25, 26? What's the increase? How much do they budget for the needle program? He doesn't want to talk about that. He wants to live in the past. So we'll do a little trip down memory lane since the Premier is obviously not going to make any effort to answer any question in a reasonable time. Let's talk about previous PC government. Let's talk about that the Prairie Mountain Health up to 150. There was 150 medical management spaces were created, 125 intensive day program, 60-day intensive day program spaces were created. Let's talk about Southern Health, up to 75 medical and mobile withdrawal management spaces. Interlake Eastern Regional Health Authority, up to 75 medical withdrawal management spaces and 125 mobile withdrawal management spaces. I mean, we can go on and on here. Bruce Oak Recovery Center, up to 200 beds. Base treatment spaces. Regenesis Center, up to 24 bed-based treatment centers. And the Premier wants to, I mean, Manitobans can see it. He's just putting misinformation. He wants to say whatever he wants to say because he thinks no one's going to hold him accountable. Well, we are. And Manitobans deserve answers. He's not giving them. Let's keep going. 210 Recovery, up to 8 supportive recovering house space. These are all in June 2022, 2023. These are all funded and based programs that the Premier doesn't want to talk about. He wants to just keep saying that there's slogans and we're attacking and we're putting misinformation on the record and we're trying to create a divide. There's no divide being created here. It's just looking for answers. That's it. How much money? How many needles were returned? He wants to attack. And it's clear as day. They can see that the Speaker has called his government to order a dozen times this week and not once on our side. He wants to say there's heckling. We haven't been called once. His team has. Shows the maturity under this leadership. And that's where they get it from. Backyard brawler. Someone who wants to make an enemy out of everyone that holds him to account. Well, we're going to hold him to account. And it's unfortunate that the Premier thinks he's above the law. We can look at his past. We can look at him currently. He doesn't think he needs to answer any questions. It's unfortunate. Manitoba, that's what you have to deal with. But times will change. Premier can please answer. I think we'll, put that aside now. We'll talk about children. And I know he's going to pivot to previous campaigns. This is a genuine question that parents have. We'll see. We've heard from community critical programming for children and youth. Can the Premier just talk about the mental health services for youth? Legitimate question. Son asked me this the other day. We talk a lot about politics, and I said, you know what, that's a good question. So I'm just asking the Premier, and he can take some time. What services are we offering there? What legitimately for kids in schools, community centers? A little bit going off script here, actually, to be honest with you, because I think it's an important question to answer, to ask this Premier on funding for mental health supports for youth. Is there a 4-year spend or maybe 24, 25 budget the Premier has allocated for that specifically? Does he have an idea of how many kids are waiting for services for this, what the wait times are for kids? It's a genuine question. I hope the Premier can actually give this one some real consideration and answer it. Thank you, Honourable Chair.
The Honourable First Minister.
With regards to the, "aw, shucks, I didn't engage in wedge politics" preamble that we just heard there, I want to point out for the committee that the member opposite makes a number of claims about press releases that were put out under the previous government. But I just, in the previous answer, illustrated the actual wait times that they left people with in Manitoba. And then I provided the update on how progress is being made to reduce said wait times. So again, if the member were paying close attention to what's going on in the committee that he's participating in, he would see that Manitobans are getting better government today than they were under his time in office. What's more, if he was so proud of the record of him and Heather Stephenson, why didn't they run on that? It was bizarre to run on the landfill and parental rights when they had this belief that things were strong under their time in government. Why didn't they talk about that? It's gotten a newfound interest in the economy. Why didn't they talk about that in the last campaign? They chose these wedge issues because they thought it would be to their political advantage. Manitobans were mature and saw through those cynical tactics and decided not to support them. When we're talking about youth services, the member touches on a number of topics, each of which are important. But it's important to notice that we have a comprehensive approach to helping youth in Manitoba. One of the most profound investments that our government has made is Universal School Food Program. I was at Wayota School during I Love to Read Month, a school where they know our former colleague Nello very well. There's a young child there who said, "Oh yeah, the food cart program. I thought that was so awesome." When there's something government does that a small child can understand, you know it's tangible, it's real. When you think about the social determinants of health, meaning how healthy are people going to be over the rest of their lives, and what's that going to mean for not just the healthcare system, but also how successful they are, investing in nutrition at an early age is good. When you think about educational achievement and how that increases lifetime income for people, school food program is bringing kids to school who were absent on too many days in previous years. And that is a social good. So we could go on, but I think members around the table understand the gist of what I'm saying here, which is that Universal School Food Program, or the food cart program, as one child at Wayota said, is an important way for us to intervene in the lives of young people. At the same time, members opposite have raised numerous public safety questions in question period, and so I know that there are important considerations there. I noticed that they haven't asked about public safety the past few days, likely because the Winnipeg Police Service said that crime is down and youth crime is down. And we took a comprehensive approach there too. Again, there's the preventative nature of the investments around school food and recreation, facilities like the one in Lorette, which is currently under construction, and others around the province. But again, there's other young people who are on a negative path and need help turning things around. So we're also investing in educational services and rehabilitation services for those youth. And here I'm thinking of my colleague from Kirkfield Park, who's worked on the front lines with young people who need support in terms of finding a positive path, and many other good people in the community doing things like that too. Action therapy comes to mind as one particularly powerful example, where instead of opening an office and launching a service and expecting the youth in crisis to come to you, instead they flip the model on its head, and the therapists go out into the community in trucks and cars and go find the youth in crisis and bring them to positive events like feasts and walks and neighborhood cleanups and powwows and community events and rallies and all sorts of important things. So our government is supporting initiatives like that as well too. When we look at the investments in mental health and addictions, there's often a youth component to these initiatives. So again, when I think back to the Public Safety Summit we had, I believe it was at the end of last April, there were many young people in attendance, and they identified the role that law enforcement and the justice system has, but they also talked about recreation, education, and investment in community. And so we're delivering on all of that.
The Honorable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Honorable Chair, and I don't think anyone would disagree that it's everyone's responsibility, especially government and people in government, to no kid should go to school hungry. I support that. I think it's past, may he rest in peace. Am I allowed to say his name? Yeah, Nello Altamari, that he passed that. I think it's a universal skill program. We might disagree on what the rollout is. We might disagree on how much and how it's done. But I think we all agree, of course. I will actually commend that for feeding kids that go to school. It's a great, great program. Great idea on how to do that. The question I was asking the Premier was, mental health supports as well. And yes, this plays into it. He didn't want to touch on any of that stuff, so I'll move on to the next question. As the head of the Executive Council, the Premier is ultimately responsible for actions of all his ministers, including the Health Minister. Yesterday, we saw that the Health Minister was given a grade of a D- by the Manitoba Nurses Union, and the Premier gave her an A+. I think there's a large disconnect between the Manitoba Nurses Union, Darcy Jackson. He's either saying is completely out to lunch by giving a D-, or the Health Minister is completely out to nuts by giving an A+. It's not an A+ versus a B, it's an A+ and a D-. So which one does, it seems like the Premier's pretty obviously calling out the Manitoba Nurses Union that they don't know what they're doing. They have no idea what they're talking about by assigning a D- grade. It's unfortunate that he takes that approach with the unions, seeing how he relied on them heavily in the last election. Early in his mandate, early in their mandate, the Health Minister quickly canceled the provincial surgical program and shut down exit diagnostics and surgical recovery task force. 2 years later, we're still seeing, not still, wait times are going down under their PCs. And now wait times are going up 2 years later. 2 years in the campaign on fixing health. We'll fix health right away. And they're still on a listening tour. Still seeing growing wait times and delays in surgeries. And all the progress that was made by the previous government is gone under this NDP and their partisan ideology. And now they've turned the nurses union against them and the doctors. Pretty much all of Manitoba will be turned against this NDP soon enough. And on May 1st, the minister does a release announcing a new lower wait time team for emergency wait room waits and nothing. It seems like the minister did it for a year and a half establishing the new team. Could have just kept the old team. Maybe traded some players and expanded to whatever it was so Manitobans could have got the services they need. So I asked the Premier, maybe, since the Health Minister reports to him, if the Premier regrets that and leaving Manitobans in pain and suffering for almost 2 years to announce essentially the exact same thing that was being done before. And the Premier admits that he and his Health Minister have made a mistake, and because of their mistake, Manitobans suffered in pain when they didn't need to.
Leader of the Official Opposition, are you done?
I think that was the question.
That was it? Just before I stop the clock. Okay.
For sure.
The Honorable First Minister.
Well, yeah, no one was clear on whether he was done because no one knows what he's talking about, including himself. Should we list the examples in the preamble there? The head of the nurses union's name is Darlene. Small example, but still one. When the Mercer, when the member opposite talks about we shut down the provincial surgical program, like it's just simply not true. Shutting down the provincial surgical program would mean that you canceled every operating room, including private surgical facilities in the province. Like obviously that didn't happen. Obviously there's thousands and thousands of surgeries going on all the time on ortho and, all sorts of cataract and heart and all sorts of things. So obviously that was wrong. The member also conflates the announcement that the health minister made about reducing emergency room waits with the diagnostic and surgical project of farming out surgeries to America that the former Heather Stephenson government had that he participated in. The other mistake that he had made in his preamble is he said progress was being made. What progress? Progress on closing emergency rooms? Progress on firing nurses? Those are the only indicators that we saw under the PC's terms in office. So what do we do with the ER group? Member makes reference to building teams. And what I would say is we went out and we built a very strong team. We built the Avengers of Healthcare to help us deliver better emergency services for you, the people of Manitoba. We brought in people who we know well and that were highly recommended to us. We brought in people who were critical of us, including in the 2023 election campaign. People who criticized us on the record. We said, you know what? Dissent makes the final outcome stronger. Let's bring those folks in and hear what they have to say. We brought in people who were already there, who had already been appointed under the former PC government. I would say we did the same thing under surgeries too. There's people who were appointed under the PCs that we kept in the role. Because again, we're not taking an ideological approach, we're taking a made in Manitoba approach. Who are the best people that we have in this province to help us fix healthcare? They know the ideas, they know the solutions from working on the front lines. And so that's what we're doing. The member opposite in the preamble, in which he is trying to chastise a government that is fixing the mistakes that the PC's made, he betrays the fact that he confuses emergency services with surgeries. He confuses the names of people. He confused opening new facilities with closing them. So again, if we want to talk about healthcare in the next election campaign, I will be very, very happy. And I will gladly engage in any debate, particularly after seeing the confusion that the member opposite shows. Now, when we're talking about progress that's being made, yes, I would like things to move faster. But I encourage the members opposite to hold a press conference at the end of the month when ER wait times are released. I encourage the members opposite to join us in communities like Arborg and Transcona and other parts of the province that are seeing personal care homes beds built that never happened under them. I encourage the members opposite to do their own research. FIPA the number of nurses working on the bedside today compared to when they took office. FIPA the number of physicians. FIPA the number of healthcare aides. Progress is being made on staffing. Progress is being made on safety. Progress is being made on waits. Progress is being made across the board on healthcare. Now, is it where I would like it to be? No. I want the wait to be zero. I want the staffing to be 100% in every area. And I want that all delivered yesterday and on budget. But we're on the journey towards being able to get there. And so these are important considerations for the people of Manitoba to keep in mind. And the health minister, they're a very high performer. They don't need me saying nice things about them, but I do anyways. Yesterday, they went out and spoke to the nurses at the rally on the steps. Can you imagine one of the PC health ministers going out to speak at a healthcare rally at Seven Oaks or the Vic, or even the exact same rally that the nurses had on the front steps? No, you can't.
Members' time is expired.
Thank you.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Honourable Chair, and I thank the Premier. I apologize to Darlene Jackson, not Darcy Jackson. That was apologize. Is right. So thanks for pointing that out. Premier wants to talk about numbers and facts. Let's get some facts here. 3 months ago, the wait time was 24,000 patients lined for an MRI. Yesterday, there are 28,479. That's an increase of 4,479, in case the Premier wants to pull out his calculator for that. Some more numbers for the Premier. 3 months ago, it was 6 to 8 months for wait time, and now it's 10 months. That again is an increase of 4 months for that. So the question to the Premier is simple. He talks about numbers coming down and down and down. These numbers clearly show on Manitoba's health website, on their own website, these numbers have gone up. Can the Premier please explain why the numbers have gone up on his website when he's standing here in committee or sitting here in committee telling Manitobans they've gone down.
The Honorable First Minister.
As the members got to hit refresh. That's the answer.
The Honorable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. And I give the Premier, he's got a sense of humor. Sometimes it's nice to exchange some pleasantries and back and forth. And I do actually give the Premier credit for that. And I hope he knows when that's given genuinely. But this is a serious question. And he wants to hit refresh. I have the iPad right in front of me here. We've hit refresh right in front of us. And it's showing that. So hit refresh, still showing numbers have gone up under his government. It's not a joking matter. If you could please answer why the numbers are going up on his own website and he's saying they're going down here in committee.
The Honorable First Minister.
Yeah, as I said in some detail, we're making progress on healthcare. Where the members opposite cut staffing, where they didn't hire any institutional safety officers, where they closed emergency rooms, where they hired American companies to deliver health services at the same time that they were firing people in Manitoba, we're changing all that. We're changing the approach to healthcare, and instead of bringing in people from out of province, we're turning to the local experts because we believe Manitobans know the solutions here at home. So, again, the refresh button that needs to get hit is on the PC approach. They continue to want to talk about sending money out of province or privatizing services. They should focus on hiring nurses, hiring healthcare professionals, hiring physicians, and delivering for you, the patient. We're proceeding with reopening emergency rooms. We've opened some in rural Manitoba that were previously closed. We've got community consultations underway for 2 other emergency rooms that we committed to in the last election. And we'll be moving towards shovels in the ground on those very soon. We're working on staffing up other facilities that will be coming online and ensuring that instead of having empty wards, which we saw under the Stephenson and Pallister governments, that instead we'll have bustling facilities focused on keeping people healthy at home in the community. So these are important measures of success and important priorities for us to invest in. We're taking steps to ensure that the staffing, which is a prerequisite for opening new facilities, expanding care, that's all moving forward. And we're bringing back targeted services such as the Mature Women's Health Center in South Winnipeg, which of course is going to serve people in South Winnipeg, but it'll be really a province-wide center of excellence. It'll help people as they age to be able to stay healthy in the community. This builds on the investments that we had in this year's budget, announced with our PharmaCare bilateral with the federal government to bring in PharmaCare coverage for hormone replacement therapy. Now, the members opposite, I'm sure they want to talk about parental rights, but what we're actually talking about here is people who experience menopause and perimenopause. And as women in our society experience menopause earlier, there's a greater demand for hormone replacement therapy, and now we're covering that free of charge. So not only is it a healthcare investment, it's also an affordability measure, which is good. So the members opposite want to litigate the details of the improvements to healthcare that we're making. That's great. We're litigating the repair job that we're doing over the cuts that they caused. So again, after you bash a hole in the wall, you can criticize the handy person who comes by to fix the damage, but it kind of lacks credibility. Well, not kind of, it does. Full stop, lacks credibility. So again, we can continue to talk about those investments, and we will. The Mature Women's Center would build on HRT being publicly covered under PharmaCare by also ensuring that not only is there prevention when it comes to primary care, but also prevention for secondary and tertiary care as well too. Meaning, if somebody does suffer an injury or somebody does become sick, how do we help them from becoming more injured? Or how do we prevent them from becoming sicker in the future? So those are important investments that we're returning. So again, the member opposite is criticizing new investments that we're making and saying that, oh, there's an issue with the wait time, or we're not standing up the new service fast enough, when in fact they closed this facility, when they ended that program. There is no mature women's health center in South Winnipeg or in Manitoba right now because of the actions of the PCs. Same thing with surgeries, diagnostics. You look at the sleep center and the initiatives that they tried to privatize from there. What's the status of that now? It's not going well. The privateers ran away, and now there's a serious need to staff up the public system to deliver those sorts of diagnostics and services. Similarly, when you fire nurses in the province, it makes it harder to staff an operating room. 600 more nurses will help, but there's way more to do.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. And Manitobans can clearly see this Premier is talking about nothing he's doing and just wants to live in the past. He wants to live in the past and attack the previous PC, yet he's 2 years under his government. Clearly asked him a defined quantitative answer on wait times. 24,000 on his website and on the Manitoba government's website, and that's grown to 28,479. No answer. You saw that yourself, Manitoba. He wants to live in the past. He wants to attack in the past when, and that's what someone does who has no answers for what they're doing right now. He has nothing. He has nothing to talk about when it comes to making healthcare in this province better. He wants to continue to attack Heather Stephenson and Brian Balzer, and he doesn't want to be held accountable for his own lack of improvements under his government. 6 to 8 months was under his website 3 months ago. Now it's over 10 months. These are direct results of this Premier and his failed health minister. He wants to talk about previously. Yeah, previously there was 85,000 procedures, including diagnostics, tests, and surgeries under the Diagnostics Surgical Recovery Task Force. 85,000 Manitobans got that service, and he cut it. He says they don't want to send them out of province. They don't want to pay for their treatments. Well, his concern and his focus should be treatment for Manitobans, should be doing whatever it takes to get them healthier, helping them where they're at, not having a political, partisan, ideological saying, we're going to cancel it, and then 2 years later, just announce another version of what they're doing to say they're going to listen to more people and travel around the province and not actually do anything to make life better. You got Portage La Prairie Hospital Foundation, $5 million for an MRI that they have said they will commit to this project, and Premier and Health Minister, what do they say? No, we don't want it. We don't want $5 million for that. We have 28,000 Manitobans waiting for procedures, and he doesn't want to do it. I'd say there's nothing more ideological than that right there. Premier doesn't care about making your life better. Doesn't care about getting you health treatments. He cares about scoring political points against previous leaders. It's unfortunate Manitobans have to suffer, and they're seeing that day in and day out under this Premier. So, question for the Premier now is there's a new hospital in Portage, Nipawa, as well as Boundary Trails. Are these counted as new beds that the NDP keep touting on their press releases and within their budget?
The Honourable First Minister.
No. The new beds that we're talking about are beds that were closed in the health region where the PCs closed emergency rooms at the Vic, the Conk, and Seven Oaks. Straight up answer. Still got more to say though, because there's important context here. There really is. The member opposite, and I quote, he said, another version of what they're doing. And I just want people on the committee, as well as any Manitobans who ever read a future version of Hansard here, to understand that the member is still confusing a working group to address surgical waits with a task force to address emergency room waits. Perhaps his team can, like, you know, do a little pull aside later and just like explain that surgeries and emergency departments are different things, right? Like that's what we're talking about here. So again, diagnostic and surgical plan to send people to America is very different than the emergency room wait time task force that the Minister of Health announced. So it's no surprise then that he's apparently got his chart upside down when it comes to surgeries. Here's a flag. We are completing hundreds of more surgeries than the PCs ever did. It's about 35% more in 2024 compared to their last full year in government. When we look at the wait times that increase in surgeries represents, cardiac, it's going down compared to the PCs. Cataract, which again, for the members who are just starting to think about healthcare for the first time ever, is different from cardiac. Wait times are going down compared to what it was under the PCs. When we look at hip and knee procedures, wait times, again, down compared to where they were under the PCs. So the members' eyes sparkled with glee when they loaded the fact that there is a transparently available dashboard on the website, but they neglected to compare it to their own record and see that wait times were longer for so many priority procedures during the time that they were in office. Probably behooves me to leave some of those stats on the record. Cardiac surgery specifically, when was the peak for that? It was in February 2022. Who was in government February 2022? So when cardiac weights peaked. Cardiac sciences is important. The members opposite themselves have raised the issue. We're repairing the cardiac center at St. B that they decimated. It was nationally recognized, very renowned place to deliver heart services, and now it's one of the many things we're trying to repair in health. Cataract surgeries, again, peaked under the PC's time in office. February 2023. Who was in government then? Member opposite. Hip and knee. Wait times peaked under the PCs again. Well, maybe I should have done a bit more showmanship and said wait times peaked in 2022, and then asked rhetorically who was in government in 2022. So again, these are some, not all of the priority procedures that Manitobans are interested in. And again, if you hit refresh on your approach, if you hit refresh and stop the cuts, if you hit refresh and bring in a new government that's focused on staffing up the front lines and improving workplace culture, listening to concerns about safety, opening new facilities, you start to make progress. But I want to be very, very clear. When I say progress, I'm not saying that we're satisfied with where we are now. There's still a lot more work to do. And that is absolutely serious. I think we can all agree on that. But the way we're going to make progress is not by returning to buying private health services in America or closing emergency rooms. The way we're going to fix healthcare is by investing in Manitobans and opening new facilities here at home, which is exactly what we're doing.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. I have many, many more questions, but something else has called me away duty in the office. So I will cede the floor for 24 minutes to the member from Fort Garry. No, I actually got to deal with some family stuff, Bob. You can appreciate that. Thanks. Great.
The Honourable Member for Fort Garry.
Thank you. Now, the Premier on June 2nd, 2019, just prior to his first election, gave an interview and was talking about the NDP climate change policy. And he said that it would include a carbon tax. So I'm going to quote him. If the current federal tax
Okay, order.
that's being...
Order. We can't hear the person speaking, so we need to make sure that the back and forth stops on both sides, regardless of who's speaking. The Honourable Member for Fort Garry.
Thank you. So I'll repeat that quote. If the current federal tax that's being imposed now gets repealed, we're going to find a way to bring a price on pollution here in Manitoba that ensures large emitters pay, that gives more money back to lower middle income people, and that could include a cap and trade, end quote. So it's very clear. The Premier said that not only did he favor a carbon tax, if the federal government repealed theirs, he was going to impose a made in Manitoba carbon tax. Now, obviously, he has now done an incredible flip-flop and says he's opposed to it. So I'm wondering if the Premier can tell the committee why he's now imposed, when he made that decision that he was no longer in favor of a province of Manitoba carbon tax, and why he flip-flopped on this issue.
The Honourable First Minister.
The member tabled a bill to see greater representation in government. Why doesn't he resign his seat and we'll elect a BIPOC woman right away?
The Honourable Member for Fort Garry.
You know, I think it's a sad state of affairs in Manitoba when a Premier speaks to and attempts to demean another MLA doing their job. Now, it's not me asking these questions. I'm asking them on behalf of the people of Fort Garry. So the Premier isn't disrespecting me, he's disrespecting the people of Fort Garry. And I think it just shows and highlights just how toxic and dysfunctional this government is. The fish rots from the head down, that this is a legitimate question, and the Premier will not give a respectful, legitimate answer. Manitobans want to know. In 2019, this Premier favored a carbon tax, so much so that even if the federal government got rid of it, he was going to bring one into Manitoba and make the big emitters pay. So what changed? Why the flip-flop? Why the change? How do Manitobans trust this Premier that says one thing on a Tuesday and another on a Wednesday? What was the Premier's position? Why did it change and when?
The Honourable First Minister.
The member gets so emotional so easily. Gets worked up, raises his voice, starts to speak more quickly. I want to talk about the people of Fort Garry. They voted for the New Democratic Party. He should resign his seat and test his mandate. See if he really does speak for the people of Manitoba. Probably not. How about the people in the constituency of Fort Garry? Probably not. Anyway, he's being emotional at committee because you can see that he tries to chastise me for some, standard of behavior, and then he resorts to name calling a second later. You want to have a debate about the environment? Keep it on the environment. If you want to come after me as the Premier, then be prepared to answer questions as well. I say that through you to the chair. When it comes to the issues around output-based pricing, when it comes to large emitters, here in Manitoba, the most important thing that we have is low-priced hydroelectricity. That is how we are going to address the climate crisis. And so that's why we brought forward an affordable energy plan. I was very proud that one of the signature announcements that we made for that affordable energy plan with the very talented, very qualified minister responsible, a minister of the crown, somebody sitting at the cabinet table, invested with the power to make decisions, and doing a good job of it, was actually at a facility in Fort Garry, a facility that manufactures transformers. And it was a great announcement because we're there with the blue collar. We're there with the engineers. We're there with the people who care about the environment. And folks are saying the affordable energy plan makes a lot of sense. Now, what is a fundamental precept or underlying proposition beneath the affordable energy plan? It's the idea that Manitobans want to do the right thing when it comes to the environment and will do so when it's affordable for them to do the right thing by the environment. So how do we do that? It's not by making life more expensive, it's by making life more affordable. So that's why we froze hydro rates. Again, the member opposite is always trying to, spend hours online contorting up various theories so that he can spring the gotcha question when he neglects to focus on the most important solution, which is help people. Make life more affordable. Make the climate-friendly choice, or as he's taken to recently saying, the green choice, more affordable, and people will flock to it. So we're doing that on transportation. We're doing that on home heating. We're doing that across the board. And the single greatest threat towards climate justice and action on global warming is if we lose a generation of Manitobans. And what happened over the past few years is that the carbon tax alienated people who were suffering from 8% inflation. And so Manitobans needed help. And that's why I was very happy that we came into office and we cut the gas tax to zero. That helped people in Fort Garry. That helped people who live in the apartment buildings along Pembina. That helped people who live in the bungalows and in the single-family homes in other parts of the constituency. I've heard it time and time again at the hockey rinks and at the shopping malls in the area and in surrounding communities. It was a real help. And so what did that do? That built public support for a government that is focused on climate action. And so if you alienate the working class, if you alienate the middle class, if you alienate the blue collar, you are not going to be able to receive a mandate to help move forward on climate-friendly policies. We're moving forward. We received a mandate from the people of Manitoba. The member opposite is lucky to have been able to get his side gig through that mandate that we received from the people of Manitoba. And now we're using that to help on affordability and healthcare and also to take action on climate. And so the member opposite, again, can come here and sub in for a new leader of the opposition who does not have the temerity, perspicacity, or staying power to be able to sustain a single question period, much less an afternoon and estimates. But again, this is all pretty straightforward stuff.
The honourable member for Fort Garry.
Yeah, I don't think the people of Fort Garry would appreciate their premier taking personal cheap shots at other MLAs or the leader of the official opposition. It's not mature, it's not respectful. I think they want their premier to reflect themselves. They wouldn't conduct themselves in that way, and it's embarrassing when the premier conducts himself in that way. The premier should know that many people in Fort Garry don't have cars. So borrowing $340 million for a gas tax holiday doesn't help them. In fact, transit has not been funded by this premier, and transit fees have skyrocketed in the last 2 years. So it actually has made life less affordable for the people of Fort Garry who need it most. So the premier says, well, you know, what's changed? Well, we have clean, renewable hydro energy. Well, that's very interesting. That sounds very much like Brian Pallister. In fact, that's exactly Brian Pallister's logic when he came out with his environmental policy, and this premier criticized and rejected in 2019, saying, no, that wasn't good enough. We needed a carbon tax. And of course, he's now flip-flopped. So there was affordability issues in 2019. We had clean hydro in 2019. We had to get working people on side for a green platform in 2019. So what changed? What changed and when did it change? Why was he a carbon tax advocate and now, a Pierre Poilievre acolyte?
The Honourable First Minister.
I don't know. I guess it's the same sort of question as why is the only photo from the 2023 election of the member for Fort Garry standing behind a podium sign that has my name on it? Sure, the folks in Fort Garry who voted for the NDP would probably want to know the answer to that. When it comes to issues of climate, again, I love talking to the activists who come here to the steps. Every Friday when folks are outside, and again, the number is far smaller than it was in past years, but their commitment is just as intense. I stop and talk to them. But if you want to move mountains when it comes to global warming and climate justice, you don't just need to talk to the activists. You need to be able to go to the Whiteout Party outside of Canada Life Centre and have your policies receive support there. That's what we're doing. We can go to a Jets game, we can go to a Bomber game, we can go to a local soccer field, a local baseball diamond, and the things that we're doing in government make sense. People are taking advantage of the programs that we're rolling out. We're bringing Indigenous nations along. The member opposite has tried to criticize some of these steps because, again, didn't win at the game, took his ball, went home. That's okay. That's fine with me. Criticize away. But the reality is, if you criticize a joint venture with an Indigenous nation, you are criticizing an anti-poverty measure on reserve. Put that in the pamphlet and let's go to Fort Garry. Put your comments in court in a pamphlet and let's go to Fort Garry regarding impaired driving. Let's do that. I'll happily talk about the carbon tax. I'll happily talk about the much better policies on the environment that we have. I'd even go to a green rally. I'd even go to some sort of forum in the next election to talk about these issues because I'm sure we'll have to. We'll go to the debate and we'll hear the member for Fort White confuse surgeries with emergency departments. We'll answer questions about how making life more affordable on climate-friendly initiatives helps to gain popular support for those initiatives. And we'll even have people in constituencies across the province making the case that another mandate is going to be helpful for us to be able to achieve climate justice. Some really exciting things are happening in government right now around wind power. Folks in the environmental movement have been waiting years for renewables to get the necessary attention and scope of investment. We're backing that up in this year's budget with an Indigenous loan guarantee program so that Indigenous nations can not only help connect renewables to the grid, but also put people to work in good paying blue-collar union jobs. These are important measures. And I'm sure the member opposite will, jump in with the fluoride conspiracy crowd soon and talk to us about the high-pitched frequencies of windmills and the birds that get killed and oppose that too. That's okay. It's important that people hear fringe views from time to time, but we'll continue to make the investments that will make sense, hopefully, to folks in the environmental movement, but also will make sense to folks who are at the whiteout party tomorrow night, cheering on our beloved Jets. Will make sense to seniors who are living in assisted living facilities. Will make sense to people in the north. Will make sense to people in the Pembina Valley or even Portage la Prairie. Might not be on our target seat list just yet, but who knows a few years into the future. And so these are some of the considerations that go into environmental policy. And, I know that the tone of belligerent condescension backed up by falsely exaggerated claims of expertise are one way to try and influence government policy, but another is to talk to experts, talk to community, and build a critical mass around doing positive things. And so our government has chosen to do the latter. I'm very proud of the Minister of Finance, Minister responsible for Manitoba Hydro, the Minister of Environment and Climate Change, and the Minister responsible for Efficiency Manitoba, and everyone else who's contributing to the great steps forward that we're taking on the climate. Really, at the end of the day, if the member cares about climate, you should support our government and support these measures.
The honourable member for Fort Garry.
So I just want to chart the Premier's evolution here on this issue. So he was for the carbon tax, and then he adopted Brian Pallister's position that because Manitoba has a clean hydro grid, we shouldn't be subject to carbon tax. But he also adopted Brian Pallister's position that it was okay for other provinces that didn't have green hydro to have a carbon tax. Then on March 28, 2024, the Premier meets with his ideological fellow traveler, Pierre Poilievre, and it must have been some kind of meeting because afterward, it was sort of a road to Damascus moment. He has his conversion and he comes out and now he no longer agrees with Brian Pallister. He agrees with Pierre Poilievre. He doesn't think there should be any carbon tax anywhere. So again, another huge flip-flop. And if people, Manitobans' heads weren't spinning from that, 3 days later, he meets with the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, who challenges the Premier at that time to come up with a creditive alternative to a carbon tax to reduce emissions. Now, the Premier says he accepted Justin Trudeau's challenge and would be announcing a credible alternative to the carbon tax, and then nothing. No announcement, no credible alternative. So the Premier has said that Manitoba is going to reduce carbon emissions by 45% in the next 5 years. And I guess my question to the Premier is, are we on track to meet that? And based on what policies that he's brought in, and what is his credible alternative to the carbon tax? Because EV rebates is not going to get you there.
The Honourable First Minister.
Yeah, we've got expert analysis that shows our existing policy framework is taking us to net zero in Manitoba by 2050. I shared this with the Prime Minister, the current Prime Minister, and said, hey, if you want the case that we can get to net zero in Canada without a consumer-facing carbon tax, let's have other jurisdictions follow Manitoba's lead in what we're doing right here. It's a good message. So what is the member doing at committee here today? He's riding on the train to a climate-friendly future, and he's complaining and shouting at the sky, where is the train that's going to take me to a climate-friendly future? My answer through you, the chair, is you're riding on it. You are on the vehicle. You are on the trajectory. You are on the path right now that is taking you to net zero. It's there for everybody. We're all participating in it. When he tries to score political points by comparing me to Brian Pallister, my climate policy is nothing like Brian Pallister. Brian Pallister brought in a carbon tax. Go read Hansard, who blocked it from being passed in Manitoba. It's a rhetorical question, but it was me. I used the 5 bills that we could use to delay procedurally in the House. I used one of those spots to block the carbon tax from being brought in. So unlike the PCs, who have flip-flopped back and forth on the issue of the carbon tax, and I see a shocked look from my friend from Portage La Prairie who asked Brian Pallister for donations for his campaign, but yeah, Mr. Pallister did actually bring in a carbon tax, right? And all the colleagues who were there voted for it. We stopped it. So I don't think you can compare me to Brian Pallister in good faith. When you talk about Mr. Poilievre, I talked to Mr. Poilievre this morning. I talked to Mr. Carney yesterday. I've spoken to everyone who has a chance to lead at the federal level in Western Canada. My responsibility is to Manitobans. I'm not the Premier for the NDP. I'm the Premier for Manitobans. And so we're making good decisions. We're making a difference for people. We're making life more affordable as we tackle issues like global warming. Transit, we brought in a new funding model for municipalities. We've increased funding. They've got more money than ever before. We funded NFI Group to be able to not only manufacture zero-emission buses, but to onshore manufacturing and create new blue-collar jobs in Transcona. That's in Manitoba. The member opposite might want to run to his next rally and talk about a just transition while he turns his back on a government that is actually funding the creation of blue-collar jobs in the advanced manufacturing, zero-emission, mass transit, transportation industry. He can continue to ask questions, which is his right, and will continue to take actions, which will make his life and everyone else's life better.
The Honourable Member for Fort Garry.
Well, I don't think this Premier has to worry about anybody accusing him of being the Premier of the NDP. I've certainly heard from many NDP members who've felt betrayed by this government and by this Premier, and how much there's been a continuation between the policies of Brian Pallister and this Premier. But in that June 2nd, 2019 interview, the Premier also made a second pledge, that he would pass a law to require Manitobans to cut carbon emissions by 45% by 2030 and become carbon neutral by 2025, and would require annual progress reports. Now been 2 legislative sessions, halfway through his mandate, no such law. Has the Premier flip-flopped yet again and has no intention of bringing in a law that would require Manitoba to legally cut emissions?
Again, the member is so worked up about his supposed gotcha question that he ignored the answer he just got. We are on a path to net zero by 2050. That's what everybody wants. Everybody says net zero by 2050. There's no other date in mind. There's no other emissions target that is being widely circulated. We've got the evidence to show we're on that trajectory with the policy framework we've already brought in place. Sure, the member opposite wants rationale to bring in private members' bills so he can justify his time here. That's fine, go ahead. But we're taking the actions to actually do the work. When the new federal government comes around to talking about climate, guess who they're going to point to when they're asked, how does a jurisdiction decarbonize while still keeping life affordable and putting people to work? They will point to Manitoba. And we'll gladly talk to other jurisdictions about how they can do the same. Of course, Manitoba is in a unique position because Manitobans have been investing in low-carbon electricity for the better part of 60 years. But at the same time, there's additional steps that need to be taken, and we are making those investments. We're making those investments when it comes to advanced manufacturing and blue-collar jobs. We're making that when it comes to bringing renewables, more renewables onto the grid. We're doing that when it comes to exporting power that will help to decarbonize other jurisdictions. I'd encourage the member opposite to do some back-of-the-envelope math and think about how much power that we just repatriated from the United States of America would move in terms of GHG emissions in Saskatchewan and Alberta. And then perhaps bring the pom-poms to the next question period and say, you know what? This government has the right idea. They're going to displace carbon in other jurisdictions while building wealth in Manitoba. We've got an EV rebate program. The member drives an EV. What are you criticizing, my friend? You're trying to close the door behind you through the chair? I think everybody deserves to have a shot at an affordable electric vehicle. I think every transit service should have a zero-emission bus that's manufactured in Manitoba, and I think our grid should have more wind turbines on it. What does a climate-friendly person have to criticize with that?
The hour being 5 o'clock, committee rise.